lovely day. It's a quiz here with Dave, and today's quiz is all about the Olympics and the Paralympics. So there's going to be 7 rounds. Let me try again. There's going to be 4 rounds of 7 questions. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. So there's going to be 4 rounds of 7 questions. I'll get there, don't worry. What you will need today is some pencils and paper. So I'll give you a couple of moments just to get hold of those. So pencils and papers you will need for the answers. When it comes to the answers, please don't put the answers in the comments because otherwise everybody will see them. And really, you will be helping everybody else. But if you'd like to say hello, I'd love to say hello to you. If you leave your answers or your name in the comments, no answers. So we're going to have 2 rounds to start with. There'll be 7 questions in each round, and then we'll mark them up, and then we'll move on to the other 2 rounds, and then we'll mark those up. So today's rounds are in this order. First of all, we've got the Olympics in general. Then we've got some questions on track and field. Then we've got other sports. And then we have Paralympics. So we're covering as much of the Olympic spectrum as we can. So I'll just give you a moment then just to finalize getting those pens and papers ready. So there we are. Let's give it a go then. So round number 1, as I say, it's all about the Olympics in general. So which London exhibition centre shares its name with the birthplace of the ancient Olympic Games in Greece? So which London exhibition centre shares its name with the birthplace of the ancient Olympic Games in Greece? Quite a lot of us will have been there. I think the Ideal Home exhibition's been here. I think they've had various motor shows there over the years. So which London exhibition centre shares its name with the birthplace of the ancient Olympic Games in Greece? So that was question number 1. Let's move on. Question number 2. Now, the modern Olympic Games did start in Greece. That's the Games as we know them. But in which year? So we had the very ancient ones with all the gods and all the competitors for that time, thousands of years ago. But the Olympics that we know now started again in Greece, but in which year? So I'll give you a clue. It was quite a while back. Okay, I'll give you an extra clue. It's over 100 years ago. So in which year did the modern Olympic Games recommence in Greece? That was question number 2 on the Olympics in general. Question number 3. What is the only country that's won a gold medal at every Summer Olympics? Now, only one country has ever done this. Hundreds of countries take part, but only one country has managed the feat of winning at least 1 gold medal at every Summer Olympics. But who is it? So those are 3 questions on the Olympics in general. So we've got 4 to go in this round. Now you'll remember this if you remember the opening ceremony of the 2012 Games here in London. Which comedy character featured in the opening ceremony in 2012? A very famous comedy character, and if you remember, he overtook lots of people training in the Chariots of Fire film. He overtook lots of them when they were training on the beach by driving past them in a car. But who was he? Who is that comedy creation? If you get the name of the actor, that's fine, but I'm really looking for the comedy character. Who was it then who got into his car and drove past all the other athletes that were running along practicing for the 1924 Paris Olympics? Yes, 100 years ago, that won the Chariots of Fire. So that was question number 4. Let's move on. Question number 5. Which of the following sports is not an Olympic sport? I'll give you a choice of 3. So it's either softball, golf, or artistic swimming. One of those sports is not an Olympic sport, but which one is it? It's either softball, golf, or artistic swimming. So which one of those is not an Olympic sport this year? So let's move on. Penultimate question for this round. Question number 6. Which was the last city to host the Summer Olympic Games in the Southern Hemisphere? So which was the last city to host the Summer Olympic Games in the southern hemisphere? And question number 7, last one in this round. Where will the next Summer Olympics take place? That's in 2028, as you know, but which will be the host city for 2028? So that was your Olympics in general. So now we'll move on to track and field. So question number 1 with your track and field questions. Okay. In which event could a competitor perform the Fosbury flop? Very famous move in this particular sport. It's a really good technique. In which event could a competitor perform the Fosbury flop? Let's move on to the athletics tracks for number 2. Question number 2. How many laps of the track would you need to complete to finish the 800 meters race? So how many laps of the track would you complete to finish the 800 meters race? Staying with athletics, question number 3. Who holds the Olympic and world records for the men's 100 meters? So who holds the Olympic and world records for the men's 100 meters? Very, very famous athlete. There's not a lot of people in the world who will never have heard of him. Very, very fast, quick out of the blocks. But who is he holding that world record for the Olympic and world record for the men's 100 meters? Now, this one's going to show our age. If you're as old as I am, which isn't very likely, but if you are, you may well remember Fatima Whitbread. Which event would you most associate Fatima Whitbread with? We're talking 1980s, early 90s. She was probably at her peak. So with which event would you most associate Fatima Whitbread? Very famous British athlete. Let's move on to question number 5. Question number 5. How many hurdles are there in a 110 meter race? So how many hurdles do the athletes have to clear in a 110 meter hurdle race? That was question number 5. Let's move on. Number 6. Question number 6 already. Which Olympic event shares its name with the 1990s pop artist, who had a hit with the song "You Can't Touch This"? So which Olympic event shares its name with the 90s pop artist who had a hit with the song "You Can't Touch This"? And question number 7 on your track and field. In which athletic track event would you find a water jump? So this is athletics. It's actually on the athletics track. In which athletics track event would you find a water jump? So those are your 7 questions on your track and field. And as I said earlier on, what I'd like to do now is to go through the answers. And when we've done that, we'll move on to the final 2 rounds today. So question number 1 then on Olympics in general. We'll go right back to the start. I asked you which London Exhibition Centre shares its name with the birthplace of the ancient Olympic Games in Greece. Well, that's Olympia. Question number 2, I asked you which year did the modern Olympics recommence in Greece? I did say it was over 100 years ago. It was actually 1896. Question number 3, I asked you to name the only country to win a gold medal at every Summer Olympics. Now, only one country has done that. If you said the USA, you'd be wrong. It's us. It's the Brits. Great Britain has won a gold at every single Summer Olympics. The Americans probably would have done it, but they didn't go to Moscow in 1980. So that leaves us the only ones to win one. Question number 4, I asked you the name of the comedy character who featured at the opening ceremony of the 2012 opening games here in London. Recreated the Chariots of Fire beach training scene by driving his car past the other athletes. That was Mr. Bean. Fabulous bit of comedy, that. Question number 5. I asked you which of the following sports was not an Olympic sport. I gave you the options of either softball, golf, or artistic swimming. Well, the answer was softball. It may well have been in the past, but it has been dropped. So only golf and artistic swimming out of those 3 that I offered you are still in. Softball, sadly not. Number 6, I asked you which was the last city to host the Summer Olympic Games in the Southern Hemisphere. Well, that was Rio. And finally, on the general Olympic questions, I asked you when the next Summer Olympics will take place in 2028. It's going to be in Los Angeles. We move then to the track and field. Question number 1 in this round, I asked you the event where a competitor could perform the Fosbury flop. Well, that's in high jump. I think they nearly all do it now. That's where they go over on their back. Number 2, I asked you how many laps of the track would a competitor complete to finish the race in an 800 meters race. Well, that's 2 laps. Number 3, I asked you who held the Olympic and world records for the men's 100 meters. Very, very famous athlete, Usain Bolt. Hard to see how anybody's ever going to beat that time, but we'll find out. Question number 4, I asked you with which event you would most associate Fatima Whitbread. We're going back to the 80s and 90s there. Well, she was prolific in the javelin with Fatima Whitbread. I then asked you how many hurdles there are in a 110-meter hurdle race. Well, there's 10. And then question number 6, I asked you which Olympic event shares its name with the 90s pop artist who had a hit with the song You Can't Touch This. Well, that's the Hammer, as in MC Hammer. And number 7, in which athletic track event would you find a water jump? Well, that's in the steeplechase. How did you get on? I hope you're doing well. Still 2 rounds to go. We've got other sports and we have Paralympics as well. So let's move on to other sports then. I've got the first question for you, which is, in which sport would you take part in the Omnian? Omnian. This is where you've got to know your Omnians. So in which sport would you take part in the Omnian? I'll spell that for you. Omnion. Omnion. Omnian. Question number 2. In which sport would you use an épée? Now, I hope I pronounced that correctly. It could be EP, but I'll go with épée, but I'll spell it for you. E-P-E-E. Épée. In which sport would you use an épée? Question number 3. Which swimmer has won the most gold medals in a single Olympic? So in one Olympic meeting, which swimmer has won the most gold medals? They were pretty good because they won 8, which takes some doing. But who was he? It was a man. So who was it? Let's move on to the world of show jumping. In show jumping, how many penalty points would a jumper receive if they knocked a fence down? So how many penalty points would a jumper receive if they knocked a fence down in show jumping? How are you getting on? I hope you're doing well. It's got to be worth a guess. Let's move on to question number 5. How many rounds are there in Olympic boxing matches for both men and women? So how many rounds are there in Olympic boxing matches for both men and women? Let's move on. Question number 6. Let's take a shot at this one. What color is the bullseye on an archery target? So what color is the bullseye on an archery target? And number 7, which Olympic race shares its name with an ancient Greek city and a former name for the chocolate bar now called Snickers? So which Olympic race shares its name with an ancient Greek city and a former name for the chocolate bar called Snickers? So those were your other sports. So now we're on to the Paralympics. Question number 1, the Paralympics round. Which Paralympian is known as the Werewolf? So which Paralympian is known as the Werewolf? Very famous Paralympian athlete, very famous, won lots and lots of medals over the years. It's a man. Who is he? Who's known as the werewolf? Question number 2 on the Paralympic round. Which 100-meter Paralympian sprinter from Britain shares its name with a suspect in the board game Cluedo? So which 100-meter Paralympian sprinter from Britain shares his name with a character or a suspect in the board game Cluedo? Question number 3 on the Paralympic round. Although an archery event was held in London in 1948 for wheelchair athletes, in which year did the Paralympics first take place? So in 1948 in London, there was an event, just one event. It was an archery event for wheelchair athletes. But in which year did the Paralympics proper take place? I'll give you a clue. It was in Rome. But in which year was it? Let's move on. Question number 4. Now, the Olympic flame is always lit in Olympia in Greece, but the Paralympic flame is lit in England, but whereabouts? So whereabouts in England does the Paralympic torch get lit? And it's been lit since 2014. Whereabouts in England does that take place? Let's move on. Just 3 questions to go on today's Olympic and Paralympic quiz. We're still on the Paralympic round. Alfie Hewitt represents Great Britain in which Olympic sport? So Alfie Hewitt represents Great Britain in which Olympic sport? Number 6. Crikey, just two questions to go today. In which sport did Ellie Simmonds compete? So in which sport did Ellie Simmonds, British athlete, in which sport did Ellie Simmonds compete? She's on the telly loads of times, isn't she? Never seems to be off the telly, does Ellie, which is good. And number 7, how many players are allowed on the pitch at one time in a wheelchair rugby team? So how many players are allowed on the pitch at one time in a wheelchair rugby team? So that's just one team. How many players maximum are allowed on the pitch at one time? It's got to be worth a guess. So those are all your questions for today. So I hope you're getting on all right. You'll need the answers, of course, for the other sports and the Paralympics. So let's do those. So first of all, in the other sports, which was round 3, your first question was, in which sport would you take place in the Omnium? Well, that's in cycling. Cycling is the Omnium. Question number 2, in which sport would you use an épée? I'm going to stick with épée. It's fencing. Fencing was the answer there to number 2. Which swimmer has won the most gold medals in a single Olympics? Won 8. It was Michael Phelps. Michael Phelps. Question number 4. I asked you, how many penalty points would a jumper receive if they knocked down a fence in show jumping? 4 penalty points. That will be the answer there. Question number 5. How many rounds are there in a boxing match at the Olympics for both men and women? Well, there's 3. 3 rounds, best of 3. Question number 6. I asked you the colour of the bullseye on an archery target. Well, it's yellow. And number 7, the Olympic race that shares its name with an ancient Greek city and the former name for the chocolate bar now called Snickers. It's marathon. Marathon, your answer there. So that was round number 3, other sports. Then we moved on to round 4, which was the Paralympics. And question number 1, which Paralympian was known or is known as the werewolf? Well, that's David Weir. Very, very famous athlete, won so many medals, very, very successful. David Weir is the werewolf. Question number 2, I asked you which 100-meter Paralympian sprinter from Britain shares his name with a suspect in the board game Cluedo? Well, that's Johnny Peacock, as in Mrs. Peacock in the game. So Johnny Peacock. Number 3, I explained that archery was held in London in 1948 for wheelchair athletes. There was just one event, though. It was just the archery. But then I asked you, in which year did the Paralympics proper first take place? Well, there was a series of events. It was in Rome, and it was in 1960. 1960. Question number 4. I asked you, whereabouts in England the Paralympic torch has been lit since 2014. Well, that's in Stoke Mandeville. Question number 5, I asked you which sport Alfie Hewitt represents Great Britain in at the Paralympics. Well, he's in the wheelchair tennis. Number 6, I asked you which sport did Ellie Simmons compete in. Well, she's a swimmer. And number 7, how many players are allowed on the pitch at one time in a wheelchair rugby team? The answer is 4. So 4 players are allowed on the pitch at any one time. So that's your Olympic and Paralympic quiz for today. I hope you did well, but more importantly, I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have, hopefully I'll be back again another day. Whatever your plans are, though, you keep well. And I look forward to being with you again. I've been Dave Mustoe, and hopefully I'll be him again another time. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you all soon. Bye now.